Been a long time, fellas. Been a while since.
Hi.
Thanks, Steve.
I mean, you
It's not-
inserted to a show like every day, so
yeah, it's
Just
not been a
really
while,
me.
but I mean, it's the group here. It's the show and BK. It's been a while. All right, the people have been clamoring for us. I meant to tell you guys this, and God can strike me down right now if I'm lying. So I was at one of those places where I'm made most uncomfortable. If you listen to the Nightly Fix, you understand this story at Twin Peaks. And I'm sitting down and getting ready for the show. We got to do a show there. We're doing a show to open up the tournament. I've got my laptop out. I'm going at it, putting the show together. And a guy walks up to me and he goes, "Show?" And I did my normal line, guilty as charged. And he goes, "Hey man, so good to meet you." And mind you, I'm in Houston, Texas. He goes, "Hey, nice to meet you, man. I listen to you every day. And you know what? I love Show and BK. I listen to that every single week." And I'm like, "Damn, my guy, appreciate you, man." I was like, "You listen to Show and BK?" I was like, "That's a cheat." He's like, "Yeah, I listen to the whole network. I listen to and I was like, "Well, damn, how about that? In Houston, baby. Show and BK. How about that?"
Nice.
the reach is far and wide. By the way, I will never forget the first time that I ever went to Twin Peaks, Ron. I didn't know what Twin Peaks was at the time. I was 19 years old. I was interning down in Houston at the time with Nick. And my girlfriend at the time, now wife, came down to Houston for the last week when I was down there. She came down and then we were going to drive back together. It was our first night together. She got there and it was pretty late. It was like 9:30, something like that. And like nothing was open around me. So I was like, all right, there's a spot right down the street called Twin Peaks. Looks like they got like, I don't know. People seem to like the food or something. I looked up the reviews. Like it seems fine.
Food's good.
We went over there and we walked in the door and it was bikini week. And I had no idea what I was walking into when I walked through the door. And then we walk in. I'm like, oh, I don't think this is the kind of restaurant that I thought that we were walking into here. She didn't mind. Food was great. I had a like buffalo chicken wrap or something. It was wonderful.
Buffalo Wild Wings, to all of our late friend Therese Paylor. It's what makes me think of it. You hosted the Therese Paylor show along with them. Before that, I did. And I'll never forget, we were in Kansas off Black Bob. We were at Twin Peaks. And we just lost Therese on multiple occasions during the Therese Paylor show. I'm talking straight silence. Like and you went to bikini week. Well, this was lingerie week, which they have. And I can only assume that this was Therese's first time being in Twin Peaks because as you're describing it, it just seemed to be like, what is this?
I didn't even know such a thing existed.
Yes, and Ebony, please don't get mad at me if you're listening to this, but my man, we're in the segment, right? And I throw something out just to set him up to, hey man, hey, what are some of the things the defensive line needs to do this week against the Raiders, blase this. And Therese went, and for the listening audience, he just turned and stared, and eyes were following some of the members of the lingerie week. And I just said, "Hey, Therese, come back now. Come back. Let me set you back up." Just completely.
Hey man, they say that their tagline is each drinks and scenic views, and Therese was enjoying the scenic views.
Yeah, not to mention those 27 degree beers as well. They were right there on tap. All right, we haven't been together on the show since we had to recap that debacle that happened in New Orleans. Everybody good? Y'all recovered? Is everybody, all the people listening to you, y'all recovered?
I'm great.
I don't know if I'll ever truly recover. But yeah, we're good, man. As far as I know, Patrick Mahomes is still the quarterback. Andy Reid is still the head coach. They still have their defensive coordinator. He's one of the best to ever do it. Like I think we'll be all right.
Anybody go back and rewatch some of that?
No, God, no, I never will.
Yeah, I banged out the first quarter. I banged out the first quarter, a little bit into the second.
I don't need to.
I banged it out. It was just, it was.
What do you think is worse? I'm curious for you guys. Like, is it worse to lose that way? Because we've now seen 2 of those in the Super Bowl where you just know, like from the moment that the ball is kicked, this is just not going to go their way. Or is it worse to lose the way that they did against the Bengals, where it's just absolutely heartbreaking in every possible way? Or the Patriots, I suppose, would be the other one.
As a fan, I think it's way worse to lose a close game.
I'm with you.
Oh yeah, kick my ass. No, I would like, if I can just, I can understand it. I can, like, if I can deal with it. Like, as I said, I remember my part, the part for me, and I had a little bit of hope left, but when DeAndre Hopkins got into that fight with that ball at the end of the second quarter, that fight he got by himself with no one within 20 yards of him, and he lost that battle that was thrown right at him. I knew it was over then. We're in the second quarter, and now I'm just watching, like, just in disgust, but just watching. Like, when you lose, like they lost to the Bengals, when you're in overtime and you're pacing and you're into, like, you don't really have time to deal with it.
Yeah.
I had time to deal with that sucker for 2 quarters. Like, you were ready, or hell, you could just move. You could have, and I know some people did. I think my mom did. She just went ahead and moved on about her Sunday night.
Yeah.
She just shut that thing down. And
if it wasn't part of our jobs, I would have done the same thing, man. It just, like, there was nothing more to see. You were basically watching a preseason game in the second half.
It was 40-6.
Yeah, like, it was over. I would say this though, like, you asked, do I rewatch the game? I had almost zero interest in any of the media consumption afterwards. Like, I didn't care about any of the analysis that was coming off of that game. I didn't care to rewatch anything or anything like that. The losses that are excruciating, I don't know if this says something about me or if this is the norm. I will consume everything after those ones. Like, I want to know everything that went wrong. Why did this end the way that it did against the Eagles? Like, we knew what happened, dude. They just got their ass handed to them.
Yeah, I took it all in. Yeah, I stayed with it. Yeah, I took it.
I didn't, but I thought that game, like, it was the easiest thing to dissect ever. Like, it was just simply, like, they didn't do anything special. Like, it was just an ass kicking. Like, they were just overmatched, and the Eagles won the way that they had been winning all postseason.
All right, let's jump here as we close the door on that fiasco. Now it's obvious, just like it was at the end of the Bucs game when they got beat down in the Super Bowl. All right, now this offseason is critical. What have you thought about? Obviously, the draft is still ahead, and we'll do something when that comes about. But what's been the thought of the offseason so far?
Mine's pretty simple. I feel like we have a clear understanding at this point of Brett Veach's worldview when it comes to what he's going to do as a general manager. Like, Brett Veach just is not going to pay you. If you are a non-Hall of Fame player and you are about to enter your 30s, or you're expecting guaranteed money into your, like, age 31 season or beyond, Brett Veach is not going to be the one that gives that to you. You might be able to get that somewhere. It just ain't going to be here. And the guys that I'm specifically thinking about in this regard are 2 of them. Joe Thuney, who I think all of us were at least somewhat surprised to see him not on the roster in 2025. I thought it was possible that they would walk from Trey Smith this offseason. In fact, I thought this was the likely scenario. Walk from Trey Smith.
I think most people thought it was Trey.
And then extend Joe Thuney. Because Thuney had a huge cap hit this year that you could not have going into this season. You were going to have to alleviate that in some way, shape, or form. And the way to do that is to extend him for a couple of seasons. And that's fine, because Joe Thuney's still a really good player at this point in his career. But never in a million years did I think they were going to bring back Trey Smith. But they did so because he's younger. And he's a guy that has more runway. So they can extend that contract eventually for Trey Smith and still have him in his early to mid-20s. On the defensive side of the ball, they decided to go with Christian Fulton on this contract that he's going to be playing on. It's going to count against the Chiefs for like $7 million this year. They could have had a very similar contract for Justin Reed in terms of the cap hit for this year. They decided not to do so because, again, Justin Reed is going to get paid into his 30s. Christian Fulton right now is 27 years old. He's got a 2-year deal. So I think it's been clear for a while that this is the case, but this offseason just reiterated it. The guys that they brought back are in their 20s. The guys that they're letting walk are all in their 30s. The exceptions to those rules, it's Chris Jones, it's Travis Kelce, it's Patrick Mahomes. There's nobody else that he's doing this for.
Yeah, that's a couple of those are interesting. Like a lot of people didn't know. You said Fulton. I thought it was kind of between Justin Reed and Nick Bolton. They were going to have to hand out one big one, at least semi big one, to one of those two guys. And as you said, the 25-year-old that's really, really important, and to their defense in the middle, they were probably going to go there over the guy in his 30s, especially after they brought Hicks in and they're ready to go there. You brought up Christian Fulton. And listen, they've done a lot of things, right? They brought back Hollywood Brown. They brought in a left tackle. We'll get to that. They brought in, or they've re-signed a lot of their own. They re-signed Nick Bolton, Hollywood Brown, as I mentioned. They've done several things. Brought in Mitchell, the running back. They've done several things. Omenahue brought him back. The Fulton one is my absolute favorite, and I think the second most important. Now, the left tackle is the most important, but the second most important is Fulton to me. And I love the move because this now gives Spags what he can do. And now this puts, especially I think if you want to, maybe they will mix some things up, but I think this predominantly puts their best corner in his best spot. And now you can do a lot of different things. And listen, Fulton is not a star, but he is a solid starting corner in the league. He was the Chargers' top corner. I'm not going to say I didn't see him get beat, but he's a solid player. And you got him and Watson, and now you're able to put him back in that space. I think that was more important than Justin Reed, especially with Hicks, and I think you could replace that. It was clear the struggles, and you talked about it a lot. When when Watson got hurt, and they had to just hold on to God's unchanging hand with 13 and 30 and 27 and whoever the hell else they tried to run out there. This puts them in the opportunity to be able to do what it is they want to do. So that move there, that's probably my favorite move of all the moves they've made thus far. I think Fulton is going to be a huge, huge, huge part to this team because it allows McDuffie to go where he should go.
Yeah, and I think like the underrated part of all of this too is like if like getting healthy Jalen Watson back for the defense, because Jalen Watson's just a really underrated player. And it's like now you feel heading into the next season, like, you know, whether they draft another corner or whatever, and to add depth there, you got two solid guys that you feel confident in, and then you have an elite playmaker in Trent McDuffie. Like, I already feel better about the secondary, but I also like the fact that the Chiefs were able to get Charles Omenihu back on
$7 million,
1 year, $7 million. Like that kind of like once he didn't sign like early in free agency, it seemed like it was a wrap that he was going to come back to Kansas City on a 1 year deal and try to hit the open market again and see if he could, you know, get a full healthy season, try to beef up the sack numbers and go get a big contract after next year. But like the fact that the rest of the league like allowed this to happen is insane, because the Chiefs, that was the biggest hole easily, was the defensive line moving forward. But it seemed like the writing was on the wall. We all knew Charles Omenihu was probably going to land back here. But to do it on a 1 year, $7 million deal where the rest of the NFL allowed this to happen, instead of just being like, hey, Charles, we'll give you $10-12 million, even though you didn't have huge sack numbers last year. We know you're a versatile player and you've got a track record of success. Like, it's unreal to me that the Chiefs were allowed to do this.
It's crazy. Like them getting Fulton and Charles and Minihue back, and they're paying like $14 million combined for those two players next year. It is nuts, man. Those are two legit starters on Super Bowl caliber defenses. And I don't want to overstate. I'm with you, Ron. I don't want to overstate what Christian Fulton is. He's not a number one corner. This is not some shutdown guy. You don't get those dudes in free agency, and you certainly get them for a $7 million cap hit in year number one. However, he can be Charvarius Ward early in his career. He can be L'Jarius Sneed, what he was prior to that final season when he became a true shutdown, legit number one corner. He can be Bashad Breeland for you. And what those guys were in this defense with Steve Spagnuolo at the helm were everything that this team lacked a year ago. And you mentioned the most important part of it. It allows you to put Trent McDuffie back into his natural position in the slot. So now you have Watson outside, Fulton on the other side. You've got Trent McDuffie in the slot, and it allows you to put a guy like Shamari Connor back into his natural position of playing more in the box or playing in that deep safety position. It adds depth to the safety spot where you have some questions with Cook and Hicks next year. You just don't know exactly what that's going to look like if they're playing nearly every snap together. So I love the way that they've constructed this defense with their free agency moves. Most of it is bringing their own dudes back. But getting Fulton in there, adding Jerry Tillery, who just adds a little bit of juice to that defensive line, bringing back a Minihue. I like the way that it looks going into the draft, and it sets you up to just be able to do kind of whatever you want once you get there.
Yeah, they lost Turk Warden, so Tillery coming in, adding depth. It looks good, and it's signing their own guys, but a couple of those guys didn't play a lot. Right? Like, yes, you're signing Charles Omenihu, but Charles Omenihu didn't play until November. Yes, you brought back Hollywood Brown, but Hollywood Brown didn't get back into the second or third last game of the season. So, it's almost like a newness. Also, Rashee Rice, after week 3 or whatever, we'll see how long he's suspended or if that happens. But you'll get him back at some point. So a lot of guys they just didn't have for big stretches. Serda, you said – go ahead, BK.
To that point, Ron, I think a lot of what you saw this offseason is that the Chiefs really thought they had an excellent team going into the year. I think that's what this offseason kind of tells you is, man, we believe that if we have Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, and Xavier Worthy, this offense looks a hell of a lot different last year than what we ultimately saw. If we had a full season of Charles Omenihu and we had a legit other option outside at corner, we really think we could have had a special defense. And I think that's the unspoken that was said there with their actions is that they were really, really high on what they could have been in 2024 had they not had injuries, suspensions, etc.
Well, here's the thing is, yes, and I can agree with them if that's the thought of, like, you get those three receivers, Kelsey, Noah Gray, all of that, maybe look, Pacheco falls into that too, right? He missed 10, 12 weeks, and he clearly wasn't his normal self back then. But the one thing, though, that is inarguable is, they look like they got a good group around them, but it means nothing if they get the same level of offensive line play that they got. Right? I heard you say, Serda, maybe it's the biggest hole on the D-line. I think a lot of people may just say, I'd like to have a word with that offensive line. I think a lot of people are thinking about that offensive line in particular with the Super Bowl. Obviously, the mere fact that you had to kick your guard out to play tackle to try to alleviate issues. That offensive line was clearly the problem that this offense didn't reach the levels that it should reach. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm still nervous about it. I am still nervous about it, and I don't like that feeling right now. And I clearly understand that it is late March and we haven't reached the draft, and maybe there's some still stuff out there. But my thinking was and hope was much like 2020, where they had a similar situation in the Super Bowl where their offensive line clearly was a problem and they had to get better and retool that. I was hoping to feel this offseason the way I felt that offseason. That offseason, it was clear that was changing. It was clear. They drafted 2 guys, including in the second round to get a center. They go and get Orlando Brown. Like, they did things to make it known that we are making changes. My concern is right now, I don't know how much better I feel confidently about the potential of what this could be. Jalen Moore, who they get in from San Francisco to be the new left tackle, he has not been a regular starter. He has come in with Trent Williams, has got injured in San Francisco. I think his short sample size has been pretty good. But again, it's a short sample size. Then potentially the thought is moving Kingsley, who you drafted to play left tackle, to play left guard. We don't know and haven't seen a whole bunch of that, and he hasn't done a ton of that. Then, of course, you got the all-pro center Creed. You're good there. You got Trey Smith. You're good there. And then you have Jawan Taylor, who I will say played much better towards the end of the season. But if I'm honest, I look at this group and you take away arguably the best offensive lineman on the crew in Joe Thuney. You take it away. I think they're better at left tackle. But again, it's not a full field to me personally. Maybe you all differ. It's not a full field to me personally that, hell yeah, I know they've improved. I know if they're put forth in that situation like they were against Philly, that it would turn out different. I hope it will. I think they're better at left tackle. I don't know what they are at guard. So that's my thing is it's not at this point to me a clear, definite improvement.
I think that was impossible this offseason. And I think that's ultimately the lesson that we've learned from the Chiefs via this left tackle search they've had basically since the moment that Eric Fisher, was it his Achilles popped out for him? Like since then, they've been searching in all directions far and wide to find the legit answer at the position. And they have still not found it. I'm still not sure that Jalen Moore is that guy. This might end up being a one-year stopgap. It'll be an expensive one-year stopgap, but it wouldn't be the first time they've gone that direction. I don't know, man. I'm with you. Have they solved the position? I don't think so. But I think that what they've done is they have improved the floor a bit because Jalen Moore appears to be a capable starter. And what they had last year was they did not have a capable starter. And now the question has shifted into guard, and you can live with a slightly below league average left guard. You can't do that at left tackle, man. It's just too important. It can crater the offense. And at this point, we know, like, for better or for worse, and I think this might be a flaw in Andy Reid's offense, but he's not going to give those dudes very much help. He makes their job very difficult. And if that's not going to change, you've got to get somebody that is at a minimum average at left tackle. And their only real path to do that this offseason was Jalen Moore, if they weren't willing to spend a boatload of money. Once Ronnie Stanley re-signed with Baltimore, and I don't think you ever had a shot at him based on the fact that he re-signed there, and when Dan Moore got the kind of money that he did from Tennessee, dude, Jalen Moore was the best option that they had available to them this offseason. I know they could have called the Texans. I don't think the Texans were trading Laramie Tunsil to the Kansas City Chiefs. I just don't think that was realistic. So you look at what they had available to them this offseason, I think this was probably the best case scenario, and it does leave you wanting more. There's no way around it. They've got a guy that started like 15 career games at left tackle, a guy at left guard who they booted from the starting lineup after seeing like 2 or 3 starts from him at left tackle last year. It's not super encouraging, but it's probably the best they could have done.
And it's interesting. Like the group that we have the most questions about is absolutely the offensive line. But just like when I say like the defensive line, I thought was the biggest hole on the roster. It's more about just like depth because they're throwing bodies at the offensive line. We don't know if they have any actual answers, but that's what Jalen Moore is. And like, you hope that, yeah, like they found something in this and they identified something in him as a player in the limited capacity that he's had as a starter in the NFL. And they're hoping they can build on that. Now, like San Francisco's offensive line outside of Trent Williams generally hasn't been an offensive line that you look at and go like, oh, wow, they have a lot of talented players along that offensive line. So he's been a serviceable player, but it's still a huge question mark. But when you're the Kansas City Chiefs, like BK was saying, like the Texans aren't trading you Laramie Tunsil. There's not a lot of teams in the NFL that are willing to make like a high value trade with you that significantly increases your chances of going to another Super Bowl. And so the Chiefs have to operate in this area where they have to find value. And for the most part in free agency, they've done a stellar job of it over the last several years. Like, they have identified guys that come in and make an impact. Like, they have very few just awful free agent contracts over the last several years. Like I think back to like Brett Veach early on when he like signed Anthony Hitchens, and we were all like, what the hell are you doing? Like, he hasn't done that in recent years. They've done a really good job of identifying players who come in and contribute and find a role within the team. And so we're hoping that they do that again. But again, it's one of the most difficult positions in the NFL to identify and find guys, because there's not that many guys that are even any good at it. And so it's all just wishful thinking and hoping that the Chiefs found another way to figure this out. But also, I am still very much on board with investing draft capital into the offensive line. Just keep throwing resources and bodies at it until you hopefully find an answer, because that's the only way it's ever going to get solved.
Well, look, hopefully Jalen Moore can be at least to the Orlando Brown, Eric Fisher, like in between, in that range, right? Now that you all made the point, both of you, is they just weren't competent. Like like they just didn't have anywhere to go on the roster except for they had to move their card out there. Right. And it opened up a hole with Caliendo next to him. That was a problem. And then he eventually kind of got exposed a little bit as well. Look, listen, I think I am really intrigued by Kingsley. I'm not going to lie, seeing Mekhi Becton make the transition from tackle at his size to guard. I like that. I do remember watching Kingsley, and he was a thought of, once he got his hands on you, like he had you. And I think this position potentially helps that. And of course, you don't want to just waste a second round pick on somebody that ain't doing nothing. So I do like the thought of trying him there. I want to trust them with this because I do believe they probably deserve it. I just got to be honest, guys. Like, they are messing with my head. Like, I am tired for about the last, this is now a good 3, maybe 4 years, at least 3 years. We have come to the table around this time frame and done the podcasts after free agency, right before the draft, about what they have and what they do, and then we get into it during the training camp season, when we do pods, then going into the season. And I am tired of having I hope to see the old Mahomes conversation. Or, my favorite is, I hope we get to start seeing the Chiefs fireworks again. The firework Chiefs again. The Chiefs that offense started this thing. And I personally still at this point believe that we haven't been able to see that, because I think Andy and Mahomes are handcuffed and have been handcuffed by many things. The last couple of years, I think the offensive line was a big piece of the handcuffing. I think injuries, the lack of receivers were a handcuff, all that. I don't think the receivers and the skills are a handcuff anymore. And I would hope that the offensive line isn't. When I say they're messing with my head, it's to a point where I've come to the point and I've questioned, I don't know if they can do that anymore. I have now questioned, is Patrick Mahomes still capable of putting up crazy numbers like 40, 50 touchdowns, or well over 4,000 yards, or even crazy like his first MVP year where he puts up 50 touchdowns and 5,000 yards. I don't even know he's capable. Before, guys, I've been on the thought of, yeah, he can still do that. He just can't because he's got an offensive line that has issues. He's got guys dropping the ball all over the place. He don't have a lot of guys that can just get open. He's having to help stuff, so they've got to change their offense. I am sick of it. I just want all the handcuffs to stop, so maybe we can see, does Patrick Mahomes still have that old Patrick Mahomes in him? I am just over it.
right, I'm going to give a yes or no question here, Ron. You tell me if this guy has either offensive line or pass catcher problem. Just a yes if they do and no if they don't. Dak Prescott.
Yes.
Matt Stafford.
Offensive line, yeah.
Joe Burrow.
Offensive line, yeah.
Lamar Jackson.
Probably could have some better pass catchers.
Kyler.
Yes.
Josh Allen.
Pass catchers, yes.
Tua.
Offensive line.
O-line, yeah.
Justin Herbert.
Pass catchers, yeah.
All right. And Jordan Love.
He's kind of got a little bit of both.
number
They
one.
just don't have like a star pass.
Yeah.
The reason I ask, those are the guys that are making more against the cap this year than Patrick Mahomes. If you're going to have a quarterback that makes $30+ million against the cap, you're going to have questions somewhere, man. It's just there's just no way around it because you can't throw money at all of your problems. If you've got a guy on a rookie deal, and that is what the Chiefs took advantage of whenever he was on that rookie deal, they had pass catchers galore. They had a really good O-line. They could throw money at their problems. Eventually, you run out of that ability to do so. And I'm not telling you Pat should like take less than what he is. I'm not telling you that he's making too much money. He's worth every single penny. But this is the reality of building around a quarterback that makes a bunch of money is eventually you do have to make some decisions in places. And if the Chiefs want to have a good defense while also maintaining at least a solid level of offense, this is what it's going to have to look like. You're going to go into seasons with legitimate question marks somewhere. The Chiefs have decided for them this year, it's basically left guard. We don't know what they're going to get out of the left guard position going into the season. They're hoping that they get at least average out of left tackle. Left guard is a legit question mark. And that's what you have to live with if you're a Chiefs fan. And it's up to you to determine if you're cool with that or not. But that's what it means to have a franchise quarterback making this kind of money.
And just even like that, that's why like they have to draft and develop. Like you mentioned Jordan Love in Green Bay. Like Green Bay is really good at drafting. Like they don't necessarily have a star wide receiver, but I think Jaden Reed could be that guy if he finds a bigger role in the offense. But they're an insanely young team. And that's how, like, even after the Jordan Love extension, they're an insanely young roster, and they've done an incredible job of drafting offensive linemen, drafting wide receivers, like finding ways to apply their assets in a way that is serviceable. And the Chiefs have done a really good job drafting over the last several years too. It's just that where they're typically drafting at, they're not hitting on the offensive line picks. And I still think like Kingsley could be a totally serviceable guard, but Andy Reid and the staff's track record of developing interior offensive linemen is fantastic because it's not as difficult as of a position. They've never really had to draft and develop a tackle. And now they're trying to do that and doing it, drafting it the back end of the first round. It has just not hit. And teams like the Ravens have been really good at this too, drafting these guys late in the mid rounds and finding ways to turn them into starters. The Eagles are always really good at it. Like the Chiefs they have to figure it out. They got to hit on the draft picks because that's the only way it's probably ever going to get solved for a long period of time.
And I want to give the Chiefs a lot of credit for their drafting recently. They've been an excellent drafting team over the last 3 years. They missed basically on one class, but since then they've been excellent at this. So.
Guys, that was nice what you guys have done. That was nice. Listen, I really love how you went through all of that, BK, and then Serda, you went ahead and backed it up.
Thanks, Serda. Appreciate you.
Yes, the Bengals have issues. Do the Bengals have problems scoring big points? Do they have
stop anybody though, Ron? Because that's the give and take.
Hold on. Offensively, they have. What you just went through is, do they have problems offensively? Yes. Were they able to score points? Yes. Baltimore, over the last couple of years, they're paying their quarterback. They got maybe some problems. They able to score points? Yes. They have been. Green Bay has been able to score points, right? There are many teams. The Eagles, they're paying their quarterback big time. They're able to score points and keep these things. The Chiefs never had great offensive line play during this. Like maybe the years.
I disagree with that, but
maybe the years after the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, but they haven't. And I don't even know that it's great, to where they can just roll out. When I say great, I'm talking about the Eagles. Like they can just roll out there and do whatever the hell they want to do.
Cowboys from a few years
ago. Or a long time ago, the Will Shields and Brian Waters, those Chiefs teams. Like those are great offensive lines. What I'm saying is all these teams, listen, the Chiefs have found a way to win. It shows their greatness. But they have had such issues that it has been so bad that it is a huge handcuff. Like the receivers couldn't catch 2 years ago, right? Or last year, like they couldn't even just get offense going because their tackles were just getting destroyed. Like it's so bad. It's been so bad that it feels like they're uneven able to work offense. They don't even look anywhere close to the offenses they had, not even just Tyreek, even the year after Tyreek when they were number one team in scoring. Like, we don't look out there and think, these jokers can get 24 easy. Like, no, like it has been you don't walk into games and think that's a given anymore with this offense. Like at all. They kick field goals out of the wazoo for the last couple of years. So for me, it's just like, yeah, I get you. There's some give and take with some of the things with in the league when your quarterback starts making big money. But they haven't, to the point that Serda made. They haven't drafted well enough. Some of the free agents they picked up haven't done well enough. Something has come to a point where this offense feels middle of the pack as opposed to where I think it should be. Now, this year, there's no excuse unless there's injuries or something. Rashee Rice, now that we know what Worthy is, Hollywood Brown, Pacheco, Mitchell, Kelsey, who is not the focal point, Noah Gray around this, their offensive line should be good enough with the Eric. Who the hell else was on those offensive lines? I'm honest. I'm completely drawn away. It was Eric Fisher? It was who else? Like Mitch Schwartz on the other side. Like
the interior wasn't very good, but the guards were never very good. But Mitch Morse was really good at center.
They were rolling out there with Austin Ryder,
the Canadian doctor.
Yes, those weren't the O-lines I'm talking about. I'm talking about the O-lines over the last few years prior to 2024. I thought those lines were actually very good. And if you stacked them up compared to the rest of the league, I think they were top 5 in the league. I just think there are maybe 1 or 2 legit game-changing lines that you're talking about, Ron, in any given season. And no, the Chiefs did not live up to those standards. But I think what you're really talking about, Ron, is twofold. One, it's a team-building philosophy. You bring up the Bengals and the way that they're able to score points. Sure, they are able to score points. They also give them up at a rate that almost nobody else in the league does because they've thrown all of their money, all of their resources at the offense. The Lions would be another team like this. Yes, the Lions put up a boatload of points. They can't stop anybody. They don't have the defense to be able to do so. And so they get into the postseason, and every year they run into the same issues where they can't stop a nosebleed. I would also add this. On the offensive side of things, last year, I think the left tackle position was obviously a huge critical failure for them. Like there's no talking your way around it.
It was a failure, and the right tackle position at times, especially early, for the most first half of the season was problematic.
No doubt. And that they've got to wear. That's on them, man. They missed. But at wide receiver, I think it was twofold. One, they got hit with injuries. Like they didn't expect to have Rashee Rice missing almost the entirety of the season and Hollywood Brown basically missing the entire season. And two, it goes back to the draft. They missed on McCole Hardman in 2019. And then more importantly, they missed on Sky Moore. That Sky Moore pick should have been the one that allowed them to get by with a Rashee Rice injury this year, or to get by if Hollywood Brown goes down. And because he has become a complete non-factor, that hinders their ability to overcome it, because he should be a cheap, cost-controlled option for them at the receiver position. And instead, he's a guy that might not even make the roster in 2025.
I am not going to completely poo-poo everything you're saying. But like when you bring up like a team like the Bengals, you could say they've thrown all their resources to one place, but they still, it's not like on offense, they're like the Lions where every piece of it is is absolutely airtight. The Lions have a great offensive line, maybe the best in the game. The Lions have a great running back. They probably got the best tandem of running backs in the game. The Lions have an all-pro wide receiver and a speed threat in Williams as well. The Bengals have a problem at offensive line. The Bengals don't have a great running back. Like, they're still putting up 30. Right, the Chiefs, for whatever reason, one year maybe the receivers, one year maybe the offensive line, their complete explosiveness has been completely zapped, and the big play stuff is going to be completely zapped over like a 2 to 3 year period. That is like, to me, it's just like, yo, is that just done?
Yeah, but like I don't disagree. Like, obviously, like the numbers show that. Like. And I've been seeing lots of threads lately because I guess it's that point in the offseason where it's like it's people trying to explain with just raw numbers how Patrick Mahomes isn't as good as everyone says he is and how the deep ball has totally fallen off of a cliff, which it did last season. But it's also like we talked about it for weeks. Like Xavier Worthy was open. Like Xavier, like they weren't on the same page, or Mahomes' accuracy deep has floundered the past couple of years. But I think a lot of that has to do with the offensive line. Like, I think a lot of that has to do with him not trusting the protection and not feeling safe back there. And then the injuries. Like, I fully believe that Rashee Rice, a full 16, 17 game regular season of Rashee Rice, and we're talking about like an all-pro caliber season, the way that he was playing early in the year. Like he is going to be the difference maker in my mind, barring suspension this season. And then if Hollywood and Worthy can just be effective, it'll make all of the difference in the world. But when by week 5 of the NFL season, the offense was down to Worthy and old Travis Kelce, like it just totally
and a problem
apart.
at left tackle, and they had no ability to overcome that.
Yeah, like it just fell apart in the first month of the season.
Are you
Kareem Hunt, by the way, who had no explosiveness at running backs? Like,
let me ask you this: Are you guys believers? And we don't have to stay on this too much longer. But are you guys believers that if these element of handcuffs aren't there, that this offense could be an explosive offense?
Like, are you basically asking, like, can they be an explosive offense with Patrick Mahomes and Andy
I'm
Reid?
just saying, yeah, all these handcuffs. Like, if they can have a point where they have receivers who could like catch the ball, which I think was a problematic issue 2 years ago, and they have an offensive line that can just be passable protection-wise, because I think some of their big years that, they had major flaws on the offensive line, but it wasn't like they couldn't move the ball down the field. We've watched the last 2 years where they just couldn't. At points they couldn't move the ball. They're throwing up 19s and winning and 17s. But I'm just saying, you're still in the belief that this is a team, if they don't have these handcuffs, that they can be an explosive offense.
I have zero concern about that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I just want to see it. I just want to get back to see it, and hopefully the handcuffs don't occur. Right. All right. Before we get to certified or imposter, yeah, it's coming back. They have the draft coming up. They've done a lot of stuff. Offensive line, in the secondary. They've done a lot of stuff. What holes do you think in between now, training camp, they still need to fill up?
And really what we're talking about is, like, what do you draft in the first 3 rounds, right? Because those are the guys that have the potential to see the field. So it's potentially up to 4 spots that they could select somebody in the top 100 picks. They've got that 66th overall selection that they got last year for the L'Jarius Sneed trade. I think when you look at it right now, Serda mentioned it earlier, the defensive line is something that I would still be looking for. And mostly that's because I don't think you have many long-term answers there. Mike Dana, will see what happens with him if he's going to be on the team after this season. Hughes on a 1-year deal. George Karlaftis is up for a potentially huge extension after this season. FAU, we still just, I don't know if you're going to get anything more than this anytime in the foreseeable future. And honestly, this team could use a defensive tackle next to Chris Jones as well. So if they wanted to go out there and draft a defensive lineman, I'd be totally cool with that. Left tackle's a little dicey to me. I think they need it. I I don't know if you're likely to get one at 31. I think you're playing the same game that you did a year ago, where you're just kind of waiting and praying and hoping that somebody's there. It doesn't seem to be a great tackle class anyways. But I suppose you could take another one, and then guard, sure. I think wide receiver is another spot that I would look at, but running back to me is, yeah, I would be very much in favor of a top 100 running back this time around. So defensive line would be one for me, and then on offense, you could basically go anywhere.
They keep signing all kinds of running backs. I'll tell you that.
And I think the Carson Steele experiment is probably over. I don't think Carson Steele's making this roster next season, but
I believe in him.
I mean, my biggest luxury pick in this class, because it's one of the best running back draft classes we've seen in a long time, is for them to take a running back. Like, desperately, like, Isaiah Pacheco's a fine player, but like, I desperately just want them to actually find a difference maker at running back, like somebody that defenses actually have to fear a little bit. And there's a good chance to do that. But like, as far as the tackles go, it's like, yeah, if for whatever reason they find themselves in a situation where they can take a guy that they really like, I am all on board. Assets at the offensive line until you get it figured out. But right now, the way the roster is constructed, and assuming that the best offensive tackles are off the board by the time they pick at 31, barring a trade up or something like that, I think the best case scenario for them is defensive line. And it is time to start planning for life after Chris Jones, too. Like, Chris Jones was still dominant last season. He's still an incredible player, but he's aging and he's getting older. And you can't keep banking on this idea that year after year, Chris Jones is going to be this dominant force that you can move all around the defensive line, because he's getting older. And so you have to do what the Rams did, which was they started investing a year before Aaron Donald retired. And then not only did they do that, they've literally hit on all of their defensive line picks. And now their defensive line looks like it's one of the youngest, most exciting defensive lines in the NFL. So assuming that there's no left tackle, there's no home run pick at left tackle, which is very unlikely to happen at 31, defensive line is the smartest play for the Chiefs in the first round, and really just in general in this draft. Like, try to load up on those guys and see if you can rebuild that unit a little bit.
Ron, to put a finer point on what I was saying, I think you go D-line in the first round, whether that's D-tackle or edge, and then running back, wide receiver, O-line. Those are probably, in some order, your next three picks. That's what I would probably try to do.
Yeah, I think we're on a similar page. I'm not as much as D-tackle yet, because when you're saying you got to prepare for life without, Chris Jones, I understand they got Chris Jones in the second round. Like, the odds that you're able to pull that off again to get that type of player where the Chiefs draft, I'm not saying you don't try to get it if there's somebody you attack that you see. I don't know about that as much. But to me, and I don't know where it comes from, obviously FAU has been what he's been. They just need some diversity in their pass rush. And I know they tried that with Josh Uche last year. They just don't have like a dude that's coming off the edge with speed. Like, all of their pass rushers, and George is really good and really came on late. And Chris obviously is an all-time great. But they got a bunch of like work your ass to the quarterback. There's not like, if they could have a D Ford like that, to me, somebody with speed coming off the edge is something that they lack. Like Charles Omenihu, a very versatile guy, powerful, but he's going to probably work you, bull rush, work you to there. Like, I would like to see somebody off the edge that has great bend, and I don't know if that's free agency, the draft, whatever, but has great bend to add that element to their pass rush, because they just don't have that at all. There is at no point, like Chris Jones sometimes, because he can just beat the hell out of people so quickly, but there is nobody where you're like, damn, he just came off the edge so quick, or the way he's lined up outside. Like, they just missed that, in my opinion.
This is a pretty good edge class. There's one guy that I find to be fascinating because he's got the size that I know Spags is going to be looking for. His name's Shamar Stewart. I don't know if you're familiar with this kid, Ron, because he's from your area.
Yeah, A&M.
He went to Texas A&M. He's 6'5", 270, long arms, has everything that you would typically expect from a Spags player. Ran a 4.5 at 270 pounds. Here's the problem. Had 4.5 sacks in his entire collegiate career.
Yeah.
Has zero production at the college level, but all of the athletic profile is off the charts, dude. 40-inch vertical, nearly an 11-foot broad jump. Like, it's just crazy, the stuff that he's doing at his size. It's kind of Travon Walker from a couple of years ago. Now, he ended up going number 1 overall. This guy's probably going to be more of a mid to late first-round pick. I'll be curious to see if that's the kind of profile that they try to bet on, but there's dudes in this draft they could potentially get. Walter Nolan is a defensive tackle from Ole Miss. There's guys on the D-line that will be there when they select that are interesting for them. I'll be curious because it's another draft where, man, I got to be honest with you. I think the position that's going to be shouting their name is wide receiver. It's going to be receivers that are on the board at 31 that are probably the best players on the board. And I don't know how you handle that if you're them.
And I am curious because the Chiefs do, and Spags definitely has like a prototype of what he generally likes in his pass rushers. But the year that they drafted Felix, the rumor was they wanted Nolan Smith, and the Eagles snaked him right before the Chiefs picked. And so they took FAU because all of the guys that they were hoping would fall to them just didn't fall to them. So they reached on FAU a little bit.
And he had the athletic profile that I'm talking about here.
Yeah, but he just hadn't shown that yet. Also, to me, another spot is that like Drew Tranquil and Leo Chanel. I think they're solid. I also think that there is potentially an improvement athleticism wise and what it is that they do. That's something maybe third round or so that I would look at to add to it and prepare. Because Drew Tranquil, I'd imagine maybe we're about the last year with Drew and maybe prepare for that. So I do think they lacked a little athleticism there. And Drew is really good covering and his speed, but I think there is maybe something that could be added right there at that spot.
I'm with you. And I don't know if we're going to do another show right before the draft. So maybe this is a conversation for another day, but just out of curiosity, are you guys open to running back or receiver in the first round this year?
Depends on the running back, receiver. Yes.
Yeah. Where is Cam Scatterbo going? I want a piece of that action.
I think like second, third seems to be kind of the
I
buzz
feel
right
like
now.
He's outside the first because there's like questions about his explosiveness, but I'm on board.
ESPN has him 62nd overall, so second, third.
All right, Serda, give me my music here. The game that is sweeping the nation, certified or imposter. If you're new to show in BK, certified or imposter, I say a statement. You let me know if it's certified or imposter. We talked a lot about the offseason. A lot of teams have made moves. The gap has been closed in the AFC on the Chiefs. The gap has been closed on the AFC on the Chiefs. Certified or imposter?
I'm going to say imposter. I don't know. I just don't feel like anybody's made dramatic moves to where I'm all of a sudden like, after what the Chiefs did last season, like struggling offensively, but still basically only losing one regular season game that mattered at all. Like, it's still getting to a third consecutive Super Bowl. Like, if you had to ask me immediately after the Super Bowl, like, what's the best case scenario for the Chiefs ahead of the NFL draft? I think it's basically their offseason so far. Like, yeah, maybe Ronnie Stanley would have made you feel better about all of this, but filling every major hole on the roster ahead of the draft is best case scenario for most teams, and lots of teams don't do it, and they certainly don't do it at the value that the Chiefs have managed to do it at. So I just don't feel like anybody else has made dramatic enough shifts that I'm all of a sudden like, oh, they're the team to watch now. It's not the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'm fascinated to hear what Ron has to say here because I don't even know what the argument is on the opposite side of this. I'm with Serda. I think this is an imposter because I look around the AFC and I think to myself, okay, so the Ravens added DeAndre Hopkins on offense and Chidobe Awuzie on defense. I don't think they did a whole lot to close the gap with the Chiefs. The Bills added Joshua Palmer, which I think is a fine addition for them, but that's not.
I like him. Yeah.
It's nothing that's going to really change the outlook for them in a meaningful way. They got Joey Bosa. Again, I think that's a pretty nice move for them. But these are moves similar to like what the Chiefs are doing, where you're adding pieces that you think can help you, but don't really change things in any kind of crazy way. The Cincinnati Bengals just like saw what they were a year ago and said, what if we had more of that? Like, what if we just run it back with the team that wasn't good enough to make it to the playoffs a year ago? I think the team that's improved the most is really the Chargers. And I think they're pretty good now. I think they are a real threat in the AFC West to win, 11, 12 games again, but for this year to feel a little more real. But I don't feel like the other legit contenders across the AFC. I don't even mention your Texans, Ron, who I think are maybe worse than they were a year ago. So I don't think it's really shrunk. I think if you had to say that it has, I would assume it's because you think the Chiefs have gotten significantly worse, more so than it is anybody else has improved in any kind of crazy way.
Yeah, I don't know why you keep referring to them as my Texans. I don't call them your St. Louis Cardinals. But anyhow,
that hit home. I apologize. I need to be better.
I would say imposter as well. I think the Bills are close. I think the Bills are close. I am higher on Joshua Palmer than I think others. I think they're close. I mean, I just don't know if I can't ever count on Bosa being healthy enough all the time.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing.
Feels like it's very Von Miller-esque signing.
No, I think he's better than Von Miller. I just can't count on him being healthy. If he is healthy, that's a problem. Like that's a bona fide pass rusher, especially if they're smart and they kind of load manage him throughout the season. That is a big time potential defensive threat there. I think the Chargers have done some improvement, but not like I thought they would. Like I would have said certified had they run into DK Metcalf or had they run into solving one of their receivers and getting a big time receiver there, which I thought they were going to do. I think the Chiefs ran through the AFC with that bad offensive line. I think you can feel better in certain spots about the offensive line already. And if their guys can be healthy, I think that's the big part. The Chiefs didn't do a lot of adding, but they did do a lot of adding because they got a lot of guys that missed like double-digit games last year that I think impact so much around the team, Kelsey and all that. So I'm going to say imposter. All right, man, back at it here. It's a tough ending, but hey, the quest to get back there, baby. We are out.